just because I'm seeing some newer people, different people, I'm just going to open our session again with prayer and then give a little background. So if you pray with me. Lord, as we are halfway through Saturday, through this time of just sharing some of your principles from your word, Lord, I'm encouraged by the people that are here and the questions that are being asked and just the involvement. And Lord, I just get so excited when people get excited about diving into your word and understanding what you have to say about money and finances and stewardship. And Lord, just want to reiterate and acknowledge that we know that you own it all and that you have given us a limited time on this earth, and you've given us the flexibility to make decisions, and that, Lord, we want to honor you with that. And Lord, we need your wisdom for that. We need to understand and know what your word has to say. Lord, as we talk about a subject that I know I get asked about a lot, I just ask that you would be present here. I pray that you would give people a sense of comfort and peace to ask any questions that are on their hearts, both now and going forward. And that everything that is said and talked about here would be honoring and glorifying to you and your Son, Jesus, in whose name we pray. Amen. Mm-hmm. So, for those that maybe haven't been able to make a session prior or earlier this morning, the background on me is that I had a family member, a grandfather, who went to work, studied food chemistry in college, got a PhD in it, was very, very good with making food and loved candy. So that was inherited. But he went to work for M&M Mars and created the Twix bar and was the head of their R&D, went for Pillsbury and worked for them. And I saw a lot of money managed well and not so well. So that's why Twix are lined up over here. I'm not going home with all of these. These are going to be handed out as people have, answer some questions and whatnot. And my wife immediately looked up, and so my passion as an advisor is to help Christians plan and manage their finances so that they have more to give away. I really mean that. I believe that, and I've crunched some numbers through Kingdom Advisors, looking at things. I believe with the number of people who not just identify as Christians, but who read and follow God's word, who faithfully attend a church, I believe that there's enough wealth in the hands of that 7% of the population to fulfill the Great Commission right at this very moment. But I believe that part of the confusion that the devil uses is that he makes this complicated mess of finances a little bit too hard for us to wrap our arms around, which makes us more likely to just not plan effectively and give away. We don't know how much we need, so we're not able to, effectively give away beyond that. Well, the three questions that I am asked most often from a worldly perspective are, how much is enough? Will I ever have enough? I'm not going to continue to have enough. Valid questions. I'm not going to fault people for asking those questions. I'm certainly going to help them understand that. But I think that the three questions we should be asking from a biblical perspective are, who owns it? How much is enough? And then once we've answered those two questions, the first of which is very easy, is the next steward chosen and prepared. And we're going to be talking that a little bit more after lunch, because if we truly believe that this is God's money, and we have been chosen for a period of time to be managers, stewards of his money, we're going to be called to account for that, just like parable of the talents. Did you actually take it and use it, or did you bury your head in the sand? Wicked and lazy servant. I think that there's implications for what we need to be doing. So one thing that's important, what we're talking about here is retirement. And I just want to be very upfront and say that I will give all of the Twix to anybody that can tell me where the word retirement is in the Bible. Nowhere at all. So there are some things, both when it comes to retirement as well as estate planning, that are American defaults. The idea of getting to a point where money we have financial freedom, not financial contentment, but financial freedom is fleeting. It is scary when you see people, who are professional athletes on TV, who I would say are making about as sick of money as anybody that we know. You can hear the discontent in their voice, in their speech. I'm an Eagles fan, a Philadelphia Eagles fan. I hate the Patriots. I think they cheat a little. But when I hear Tom Brady after winning his 5th Super Bowl, and there is a noticeable lack in what he's sharing publicly, I know without a shadow of a doubt that this man is not a believer, because there's something missing. There's a God-shaped hole in our lives. So first things first, I believe that we have to be mindful that our time here on this earth is going to end at some point. We don't know when that is. My prayer is often, Lord, teach us to number our days. We don't want to be like the rich fool, where we've saved everything, we put it all up in barns, and then, let's put my feet up carefree, right? Do nothing. Meanwhile, God's saying, fool, your life will be demanded of you this very night. Retirement, the model, which is work hard, get to a point and stop and do nothing, I don't see that anywhere in the Bible. I do see this balance between rest and work, and if this is work and this is rest, I think that there's always a balance, even in the beginning. I certainly don't think that, 80, 90, 100 hours a week, I see imbalance there. Well, as you age, that naturally, at some point it overtakes, but I think that there's some level of work. And I don't mean your day job where, I hate my day job with saving. You can get to a point where you've saved enough for the future where that can stop. I call that the work optional point in life. I think that's, I certainly don't see, depending on what that second stage of halftime, let's call it halftime. If retirement today is kind of like a halftime date, what that second half looks like, just like the first half, it can either be God honoring or it can be self-honoring. And I certainly don't want to fault anybody that has a home in Florida, that spends time in Florida, but my grandparents, the Twix grandparents, you know what? They're not believers. They are incredibly self-focused, even though they had ridiculous wealth. Growing up, I spent 4 to 6 weeks every year at their penthouse, their 3,000 square foot penthouse in Florida each year. We would go to Cancun every other week. Every other week. That's not ridiculous. For 2 weeks, every other year. It was phenomenal. That was, unprecedented on things. They have a ridiculous-sized home in Delaware. But I can tell you this, they spend, for years and decades, they spent 6 months a year in Florida. And Courtney's grandparents, it actually brought me to tears like a year and a half ago, who barely have 2 pennies to rub together. They have enough that they've saved, they're retired in their 80s. My kids have a deeper relationship with Courtney's grandparents, so my kids' great-grandparents. On that side, they have zero relationship with my grandparents, yet they have the freedom to do whatever they want, quite literally. That is meaningless. A check that comes in the mail, which, that's irrelevant. Does that help for a little thing? Yeah, and that has since stopped. But that brought me to tears because it was embarrassing. And so if there's one thing that I'm not sharing with all of the groups, in my study of what God has to say, there's kind of 2 things that are very broad that I've taken away from this. One is that God owns it all. We keep highlighting that Psalm 24:1. It's in a ton of places. God owns it all, and beware of greed. I came out of college where you learn things are a little bit more black and white, and I got into this business, and I saw greed, and it suddenly started to click, all these passages about greed. I saw a Christian man become physically ill because his daughter was overshooting their wedding budget, and she was spending his money. Physically ill. That scared me a lot. So, this is not for, I'm not sharing this on Sunday morning. That has prompted Courtney and I, prayerfully, to cap our income. And that was that thing I was telling you about the last session where the Lord laid that on my heart at an event at the Kingdom Advisors Conference, actually in February. Recognized that it's important to do that because it's too easy to say, oh, spend our cap here, and then as things grow and build, Well, I took that and ran with it, took it off into Leland, perverted it a little bit, and had to, come back to what the Lord was laying. And so that's a very clear line that we have decided. And we did that while still having a mortgage. And the choice there is because I'm scared. I'm scared of my own nature, my own sinful flesh, that it will be too hard. Money can be a drug. Contentment, if you're not content, and that's something that you're constantly evaluating, it can be too hard to just want more. You hear that in professional athletes. You hear that in America. You hear that in third world countries. I have a mud hut. I want a brick hut. I want 2 brick huts. Greed is not just in America. And I would caution all of us. We read a lot of these passages on money and wealth, and it's like, command those who are rich in the present world. Okay? And early on in my career, I was like, all right, so I need to tell my clients this, right? I need to tell my clients, these are the wealthy ones, really rich people, right? We never consider ourselves as rich. But if we actually take a look at the world, the economy of the entire world, and what the average income is, if you're making more than $25,000 a year, we are in the world's elite. The world's elite. We are in the top 10% of the world's income. Now, what we hear on the news a lot is, the 1%ers. 1%ers of America, right? Those are the evil. Not agreeing with that. I want to be very clear. Money has no feelings. It's in the hands of the managers, right? Well, we need to be mindful. I believe these passages are talking to every single one of us in this room, every single one of us in this country. Because if you are making even minimum wage, you are making a lot more than the average people in the world. And so that kind of shakes some things up. From a retirement standpoint, I don't know, can we hand these out? I've got 6 principles that I would put on the screen. They were typed up in the KJV. These are 6 planning principles, and we've talked about some of them, but I just want to make sure everybody has a copy. I'm not going to go through them, because if we're talking about any sort of retirement planning, you got a lot of these principles down. Understand that God owns it all. Spending less than you earn. Avoiding debt. Building margin. Setting long-term goals and rejoicing in generosity. Okay? With the retirement side, we're talking about number 5, these long-term goals. Whether you have just stopped working, you've just decided to slow down, whether you're in that halftime mode or whether you're kind of viewing it in the near future, I would encourage you to be asking those 3 questions, those 3 biblical questions. Who owns it? How much is enough? Now, in my field of work, that's generally one of the things that I'm helping people to calculate. How much is enough? You could do that with, working with an advisor, working with someone, doing some calculations on your own. What I am able to do is to help people point out what they don't know that they don't know. Okay, what are you missing? Okay, with many advisors, your plans succeed. It's all over songs. Transitioning into retirement is understanding how much is enough, and then moving beyond that. If you're lucky enough to get to that point where you're saying, hey, we're going to be able to make this work with Social Security, what we've saved, our income, a pension, Lord willing. Well, we need this. Hey, we're going to be here. Well, now the question becomes, are we properly preparing the next stewards? Are they chosen and prepared? Because we need to be mindful that we are temporary managers. No, I've never seen a hearse with a U-Haul. Okay, never happens. transitioning into retirement, there's 2 points that I will point out to that. There's a mindset, and then there's the planning aspect. And so the screen is something that I use with clients. I've got a laminated copy of it. It's something where we need to understand where accumulation moves from being proper, and I would say biblical, to speculation, because we just want more. Now, this has some ages on it. It doesn't always mean 55. I just, we've got to throw the ages on there somewhere. That's a typical understanding. In that post-50 age is when most people are looking at that at some point. A lot of my clients, most of my clients, less than 5, want to retire and do nothing. Sounds boring. Sorry. But remember that rest and work? Well, that rest category, that can include golf, that can include travel, that can include gifts, all sorts of fun stuff. But it certainly doesn't mean become completely unplugged from a church or a small group. It certainly doesn't mean make the rest of your life a celebration of yourself. I think that's where it can get away from you. There's nothing wrong with some of the most godly people that I know are incredibly wealthy. Now, they are not godly because they are wealthy, I want to be clear. But they had principles set in place early on. They continue to follow them. There are some stories about people that have decided to Bill Bright, I'm forgetting his wife's name. Bill and Von Bright, starters of Campus Crusade for Christ. They literally made a contract that they would never set their salary above $60,000. They literally made a contract and had it notarized. And no lie, 24 hours after they had done that, that is when God gave him the vision for Campus Crusade, what we know as Crew, Campus Crusade for Christ. He will tell you, now he's long past, he will tell you that he believes those two were directly connected. Now, we don't do that, we don't make a contract with God, we don't cap our income, because we're like, okay, Lord, bring the rain. But we need to be mindful that this is his, and we can plan effectively, but we need to be wise. So there's four keys that I would say that we have to a flourishing retirement, and then I'm going to have a handout that's going to help you kind of evaluate some things. Number one is engage at any age. Don't let them tell you when you're done. There is a book that I sometimes hand out to clients. It's called Halftime, about moving from success to significance. It's a good book. And it's about understanding that this is not the 1930s, the 1940s. You retire and then 2 years later you're gone. Okay? A lot of times retirement is a quite literal halftime moment, You graduate college at 20, you're working to 50 or 60, 30, 40 years. You may have 30, 40 years on the other side of that. I don't know about some of you, but for some of my clients, what they're going to do, they have no clue, and that scares them to death. Okay? So that's important. I hear these typical responses. Okay? I ask, what's the view on when a person should fully retire? I want to die with my boots on. Oh, I'm never going to be able to stop. I want to phase out gradually. Okay? Or they say, I'm exhausted and I never want to work another day. I hear that at a lot of different ages. And in my experience, that is symptomatic of someone that doesn't have balance in those early years. Now, I am not advocating that 40 hours a week is the biblical standard. Okay? Business owners, employees, just ask a farmer. Okay? 40 hours, let's get that done in like 3 days, right? We have to understand that the priority order in our lives is God, church, family, all else. Work is not in the top 3. Now, they're interconnected, right? Work provides. Work is what allows us to be able to tithe and to give, okay? But certainly doesn't mean that work should be a permanently elevated spot above those 3. And I find that when you're living as a pauper, or you're living with ridiculous sums of money overspent, it's because you're out of balance on those priorities. And people are always asking me, well, what about X or Y or Z, you know, and I'm like, that's why I said all else. God, family, church, all else. Work, all the extra, you know, activities, etc. Right? Those 4 factors. Number 1 is engage at any age. Don't let them tell you when you're done. Number 2, and this is important, retire to something, not from something. Don't stop because you're exhausted and you can't take another day. Have an understanding of what you're going to. I try to keep things simple. I like to describe it as like a dinner plate. Okay? So, in retirement, if you're looking at a dinner plate of your activities, be careful to identify what the protein is. What's that piece of meat? The main star of the dish, right? I hear people say that, you know, golf. I love golf. I want to golf. Grandkids. I got a lot of grandkids. I want to take care of them. I want to travel. That's fine. Those are your sides. Those are your corn and your peas and another vegetable. Okay? Or fruit or something else. Potatoes. Okay? They're not the chicken or the steak. Okay? They can be. You know, my parents have, you know, 9 grandkids. They've all popped up like in the last 4 or 5 years. It's, you know, pretty intense. But you want to be mindful of what that's going to look like. You know, there's a process of understanding that. How are we going to spend our time? Every single one of us, retirement or not retired, have 168 hours in a week. Time is the only resource that you know, you cannot save. You cannot bank time. It's gone. We will never get 8 a.m. this morning back. Okay? From a standpoint of understanding how we're going to spend our time, that's something that I would encourage everybody to do. Number 3 is to find a balance between vacation and vocation. I can't tell you how many people have made the move to retirement, work optional mode in life, and then found something that they love doing. Turns out it pays them. And don't you know, it actually sometimes pays them the same or more than what they were doing when they were chugging through trying to get to that point where they could stop. Work hard, play hard is a phrase I toss out a lot. Understanding that there is a balance. We like the Outer Banks of North Carolina. You know, her family likes to go, my family likes to go. We are blessed enough that next year, for, you know, a 10-year anniversary, a little later in the year, we are going to spend a week down there with each family. I threw out jokingly, like, hey, what if we ever, you know, someday we'll do 3 weeks. She's like, lady, if we do 3 weeks, you can enjoy that 3rd week. I will not be there. Okay? She understands that there's you can have too much of a good thing. Okay? I love cheesesteaks. If I eat one every day, I'm going to hate cheesesteaks. Okay? So too much of a good thing is a bad thing. Hobbies and interests. Those are things that you can explore. You have to allow yourself to think about that. Number 4 is having purpose is just as important as having enough, having money to stop. This is why planning is just important. The transition is something that can be done well. I'd encourage you to plan effectively for it so you only do it once. I have had clients who have made the stop mainly because they were violating number 2. They were retiring from something. They had to get out of the situation. It was killing them. They were just, you know, whether or not it was because they didn't have balance or not. And so they left. And then within a year, they have accomplished everything on the honey-do list. And they are bored. And they are starting to regret that they hadn't thought, you know, hadn't planned more effectively. So making sure that you have a plan for what that looks like. And frankly, if you're at the point where you know financially you could stop and do everything, well, at that point, if you're continuing to work, I'm not saying stop just because you know you're carefree, but understand that the Lord may be calling you to a different spot. And I would encourage you to lay that at His feet. You know, praying about what the steps the Lord would have you to take and talking about that with other people, especially your spouse if you're married. Very important, okay? Because when we actually stop and listen both to God and to our spouse, I think there's a lot of insight there. That verse, be still and know that I am God. I think that can be very difficult for some of us, present company included. Being still and being quiet, asking the question of the Lord and then waiting on the answer is, I think, something that He delights in doing, but we sometimes rush the process. So that's the 4 pieces I have for you. There is one other handout that I'm going to give you, and you take one and then pass it next and pass it around. Thank you, sir. Would you? I'm going to put the rest back on this table. So this is thanks, sir. This is my retirement mentality profile. Okay, it's a little questionnaires. Feel free to go through this. This is something where you can rate these, 4 being the best of each group, and 1 being the least. So that first one, okay, top left. I love to kick back and relax.
That's interesting.
I love to spend time with family and friends. I love exercising. I love my work. Just be honest. Prioritize them as you want. Okay? You go through, you rate each of those little sections 1 through 4. Again, 4 is the best, 1 is the least. At the bottom, you then total up all the A's, B's, C's, and D's. You flip the page over, and then you graph it. Now, I'm a visual guy, so we've got a little graphing option. Okay, you can see, how it breaks down. And I'm going to put it on the screen as well. So going through that's something that you can do on your own. I'm not suggesting that you necessarily take the time for it right now, but what you do is you go through that and you graph it, and then it shows you kind of just a very simple breakdown at the bottom of the back page where the graph is. How much time, what your focus is on leisure, connect, renewing, and work. That will give you sort of a broad description of what you might want to focus on in retirement. Just because, to me, sitting in a rocking chair playing checkers all day, that scares me. Okay? I would like to have some sort of involvement level. I'd like to stay connected. I love what I do. But I'm also going to let the Lord lead where family is, kids, grandkids, Lord willing. So this is a profile that I think would be helpful. There's some extras in the back. But this is just to kind of help get an overall picture. I wanted to be intentional with this section about some questions. I know we're going to have a Q&A out there over lunch, but that's the end of kind of the dedicated time on the retirement side. Wanted to see if there were questions. Anything that's... Yes, ma'am.
I know it's important to diversify.
Yes.
And it's biblical to diversify
She gets one for
when
the
you
first
save
question.
and so forth. Oh, thank you. So is it best to keep everything diversified to maybe say you have 7 different accounts for
Yep.
one, different things that you may have, investment savings? Or is it better as you're approaching retirement to combine some of those? So instead of you have 7 accounts, maybe get down to 2 or 3 for maybe
Yeah.
ease in managing that.
So in Ecclesiastes is a ton of financial wisdom. Separate your portion of 7 and 8, you know not when famine will come on the land. Well, right after that, it says, send your salt out onto the sea, and you will receive a return for it. Salt on the sea? What? Well, okay, back then, they had ships, right? Mediterranean, okay? Ships, it's not like now where usually the ships come back, You didn't always do that. It was telling you to separate your portion of 7, yes, to 8. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Now, that has value from an investment standpoint. It doesn't necessarily apply to the number of accounts or the number of different maybe firms that you're using. There's a balance there between simplicity and how easy it is to manage versus, you got to be mindful of costs, got to be mindful of what it's in. It's like when I update the budget, once or twice a month, just to kind of balance the checkbook. It is so nice because there is one checking account. That's where everything comes in, okay? It's all in one place. If I got 5 or 6 different accounts, 5 or 6 different cards, I got logins, yes, I can do it and it's fine, but it's just nice to have less spinning plates. That's the description that I use. We all have a certain number of plates spinning on those sticks, like at the, where is it? Like the circus, thank you. There we go. Who said circus? There. You can split it. There we go. So, we all have a certain number of spinning plates. Now, as things become too much, those plates start to slow down, they start to fall. We're all aware when one falls, right? When something happens. I would submit that just because we can keep them all spinning doesn't mean that we should. And I like to submit that we should, at times, make things simpler because it takes less mental capacity, less things to worry about. Mm-hmm. I would encourage you to decide how often you look at things, how often you manage it. As you approach retirement, yes, my suggestion is to consolidate and simplify. I would be mindful of who's going to guide you. I'm assuming we're talking about an advisor. Who's going to guide you through that process? So, something that I have seen with my clients, just because even though I'm a very early millennial, they are very happy because they see the fact that I'm not going to retire around the time. And right around the time that you're starting or just starting retirement, now you're dealing with, my advisor, he's not really calling me back, or I haven't really seen him much. So this is what happens when advisors retire. They don't just leave and send a letter. Yes, there's my last day. Thank you. Nice working with you. It goes from being the lead GOB practice to GOBN group or some other name entirely. And then more people get brought in. And there's not really a formal change of things of how, of who it's working with. Now, if you're having regular communication, you ask those questions. Because advisors, they tend to retire, same time as normal people, but it's really a matter of my partner, he's 65. He was getting asked the question, hey Mark, what's your plan here? Some of his clients that he worked with 20, 30 years. It was to the point where he was actually asking some of his clients who he knew their kids had studied, business in college, hey, do you want to go back and learn some finance? You come work with me and then kind of be my long-term, plan. Diversifying is valuable. That generally applies, as I see it, more to an investment standpoint as opposed to having 6 or 7 different relationships. Then again, having multiple advisors, you're more likely to not miss something. But I hope does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Right. Who wants a Twix? Who has a question? Nice. You're eyeing it up, so I'm going to give you one just because I'm married to you. But, no? I'll just sit right in front of everyone. Yeah, it's tempting. Yes, sir.
And so, I'm 24 years old.
Yeah.
Right? And I always hear start early.
Yes.
Start on retirement early. Start early.
Yes.
Dave over here is shaking his head. Yes.
Absolutely.
Right?
Very important.
Because you can't buy back time.
You cannot.
There is, just like we were talking about even this morning, there are, as you go in your career, ministry is different, right? But as you're going, just in general, for your salary technically kind of goes up.
Correct.
And you kind of grow.
Hopefully it goes up.
Position,
Yes.
hopefully, right? But the reality is, when you're first starting out, you can't do a lot. So you hear terms like, do an IRA and do this and do that. If you're a 24-year-old, as an example, just so for my benefit,
Sure.
help others as well, what is your first recommendation? You're saying, hey, start retirement, and they're like, what does that mean? What do I do? You know what I'm saying?
So I'll answer that with the baby steps that I counsel clients on. And this is, some of this is, regardless of what stage you're in, people come to me, regardless of what their financial situation looks like. I suggest that the very first thing that they do, assuming that they haven't done these steps, step number 1 is to put in a baby emergency fund in place, $1,000. Baby emergency fund in place. That just gives you some breathing room. Step 2, pay off all your non-mortgage or house-related debt. Consumptive, cars, etc. Number 3 is a fully funded emergency fund. 3 to 6 months of what your average monthly expenses are. So you're spending $5,000 a month. You're making $60,000, $70,000 a year. If you're bringing home and spending $5,000 a month, that's between $15,000 and $30,000. That could take a while, but that's step 4 is to put 15% aside in whatever breakdown you want for college and retirement. I have 140 clients right now. I can count on 2 hands the number that can save for college and retirement, fully fund both, and all of their other goals, and not eat beans and rice. Some of them are not on planet Earth, okay? We're talking somebody who's buying himself a Bentley. He's not a believer, buying himself a Bentley for his birthday. One who's making $1 million a year. I'm trying hard to witness to her, lay her out. She's had a lot of death in her family and all that. But they're just, those are the people that, okay, I'm working with them, but I'm not going to help them put their kid through college. I mean, that balancing the priorities, you got to walk before you can run. That emergency fund is important. I would say the target is 10 to 15% for retirement. If you are tithing 10% and you are saving 10%, you're going to fund that emergency fund, and you're going to be saving for the future, and you're going to be off to the races. The earlier you do that, the better it is.
As quickly as you can get to that.
As quickly as you can get to that point, but I love talking to groups, but to answer a very specific individual scenario with a broad paintbrush is very difficult because it depends on what you want to accomplish.
Right.
Depends on house, depends on size of family, depends on vehicles.
Just on the side note, my mom read a book a while back, Richest Man in Babylon, which he just did 10%.
Yeah.
He started out with 10% on retirement.
You saving 10% for your retirement, you're going to get to that point, you're going to have a lot of flexibility. Not everybody can do that. But that also comes back to the budget. I don't want to assume that you can always achieve all of your goals just by rejiggering the numbers. Let's be clear, you know, like,
Life happens, right?
exactly, life happens, you know. So that would be my target. Would I be stressing out if we're not able to do that? No, but I would have an idea as to, if things do continue, not presuming upon the future, but planning for the future, if this is a typical raise, 3%, or whatever the number is, if this is what our expenses are going to look like over the next year, 3 years, 5 years, are we going to be able to get to that point, or is it going to require a bigger discipline or a bigger shift, a bigger change? Hope that answers the question. It's, you know, but
I'll ask maybe in the lunch,
Yeah.
after lunch, I'll ask
Sure.
more of a specific on the different types of retirement that you should.
sure, and
explore.
we could go into that. I see.
Love that.
There are some really cool stories out there. I have seen bus drivers retire with $3.5 million, like school bus drivers. I have seen people, I call it working wealth, no lie. So last fall, one of the things that my partner and I were doing, we're doing our annual business planning, right? You know, and the firm wants to know, well, how many new clients are you targeting? And, you know, what are the new assets? And blah, blah, blah. Well, we said, Lord, we want to be focused on what's important to you. And we said, Lord, if you want us to have, you know, like, if you're going to give us success, let it be so ridiculous that there's no way that we can claim it. There's no way we can even possibly claim that it was of our actions, as if the rest of it's because of our actions, but that's a different story. So, no lie, within a month of that, a client who, I had a client, 2 brothers, they live at home, they're like 28 and 30, they don't have licenses, a little bit scary. Well, their parents became clients, and they have $15 million. And they became clients, and that's unheard of. In fact, it was unheard of for my firm. Like, you know, there's people that, you know, call me up and say, in 30 years of working at Ameriprise, in the retirement, you know, department, I've never seen this. Where did you get these people? I was like, I don't know. Like, you know, they're an inherited client. Like, and then, you know, just working with them, loving on them, not believers yet. But that was something very explicitly where we made a hire. The Lord very intentionally had said, I want you to hire this person. And we couldn't do it in the fall. We wanted to, we couldn't. The Lord said no, we were a little unhappy. But, we were honoring the Lord with that. He said, Lord, if you want something like this to happen, it came about. And the Lord very clearly checked those boxes, as we've all experienced, right? Now, I don't have that money. I mean, I'm their advisor, but they are working wealth. The people that have money like that, you'd be surprised. They drive your average everyday car. Their two boys have no clue. As we're meeting 3 or 4 times, early in the year, they actually were approaching their parents. Is everything okay? You're like meeting with your advisor a lot, oh, are we in trouble financially? And I'm just chuckling and whatnot. So, what I see a lot is that a lot can be accomplished without a fear of man. Texans call it big hat, no cattle. It's all flash, right? There's nothing wrong with having nice things. There's nothing wrong with driving a nice car. I want to be very clear. But if that's all that's there, better to be important with a servant than to have flash. I'm butchering the verse, but there's a balance there. So I hope that helps. We can take that offline if you'd like to, though. So, Trix. Yes, ma'am.
It's like Sam Walton.
Sam Walton. There we go. Walmart founder.
Would walk around in his bib overalls and nobody
Absolutely.
would know he was Sam Walton.
Yeah.
Now his kids you want to kill.
Yeah. Yes. I'm a Walmart guy. Courtney, likes Target more. It's okay. But agreed. Working wealth. Be surprised. I love hearing stories about a couple. I'm going to call them wealthy because we should all be referring to ourselves as rich and wealthy, regardless of what we make. We live in America. There's a really high likelihood that we're rich, at least from God's standpoint. I love it when you're at a point when you can overhear just randomly the widow in the back row of church or the widower who's unable to, make ends meet. And then you hear, and you're talking with your wife afterwards, like, I think we should pay our electric bill. And you go and anonymously pay an electric bill for 12 months. Like, you do stuff like that, you pray about it. I think there's a joy there that can't be replicated. Hilarious. That's the Greek word, hilario. In Acts, where it's the only recorded passage where it's the red letters, Jesus' words, better to give than to receive. Well, that word in Greek is hilario. It's where we get our word hilarious. To give joyfully is hilarious. Like, that's, what's the term? I'll come back with it. But you were going to have a question, sir.
I didn't know if you were seeing it when we were in Florida and then in California and Arizona. Something I noticed that I was unaware of before, especially on the coast, we were seeing a lot of individuals when they stepped into retirement, perhaps even going to a reverse mortgage or selling and going to a rental situation. Are you still seeing that trend, and what are your thoughts about that trend?
Good question. So, from a standpoint of moving from ownership to a renter, you should not be seeing that as a negative thing. A lot of times there's this stimulus, even with young couples, oh, I'm renting. Ooh. People will say, oh, I'm so sorry, renting, like you're not accruing ownership. Well, there's a value. You don't have to take care of a whole bunch of stuff. Okay? You don't have to replace that roof or that wall or anything if something happens. So that's a matter of simplicity. If it's within the budget, I think I see people even stepping down to a condo or a gated community where they do less, even though they're owners. So there's a benefit there. I am not a fan of reverse mortgages. I think that they are more often seen as a way to cash out, and they're not used to plan effectively as often as the commercials would present. That's why they get these really, really well-known people that have well-known voices and well-known faces to be their spokesperson. Why do they do that?
If they can trust them.
So that we can trust them, okay? It's a reason that they pick certain people that we grew up with, that we trusted on TV, back when you could trust TV, to be the spokesperson, because they want you to establish trust. I always say, you've been paying down on your mortgage all your career. You've been paying it down, you've been accruing equity. Why would we suddenly want to hit retirement and then go in reverse? I'm not a fan of them. I will say, just like some certain financial products, I'm also not a fan of annuities. Okay, you got financial people that are selling you and pushing you annuities. Run. Okay, they make sense very, very rarely. It's basically turning your money into a pension. Reverse mortgage is the same thing. They have a proper application in like 5% of times, but they're not usually bought. They're usually sold, and I got a problem with that. So I'm the type of advisor, I like to turn things on its head. I point it out. I would rather people pull money from us to pay off debt, to give it away. Now, if you're going to do this and be unwise, but we're not talking about that kind of ignorance. We're talking about it's too often restrained and restricted. I really have a problem with that. So I'm not a fan. I don't want to say that it's a fraudulent product. It's something that does make sense in certain situations. Grandparents would be one. If something like that happened and they wanted to continue living on their own and that was the only option, that's a certain example of when it might make sense. But a lot of times if you're presented with multiple options, there's other options that make better sense because there's high fees, there's things that can happen that make it a problem. So, good question. That's
Big
Yes,
thing
sir.
that I heard about on those annuities, if you
Yep.
put it in savings or, and another type of saving, another type of plan, when you die, you basically, nobody else gets it. It stops right there, doesn't it?
So that's it's called an income annuity. Basically, you're taking a block of money and you're turning it into a pension. So if you have pension, we all have Social Security, knock on wood, we will hopefully do. But Social Security, if you have a pension outside of Social Security, an annuity, that immediately takes you off the list of an annuity being something, an income annuity being worthwhile. I'm not going to go too far into the weeds, but with an annuity, the problem is that there's two buckets. Okay, you put $100,000 into an annuity, there's two buckets. The bucket that gets highlighted and sold, it's super attractive, is the income bucket. Okay, your $100,000 is going to go in here, and you're going to get 6% a year, 7% a year. You might even get a bonus up front. Woohoo! Right? Your money grows 6% a year until you flip that switch and turn it into a pension. Problem is, if you don't want to do that, this bucket means nothing. It's your actual accumulation value. This is where your $100,000 goes. It gets invested. The fees are anywhere up to 4% a year. And the performance dictates how much is left if you ever want to make a change. So if you know for a fact that you want to take some money and you want to turn it into a pension, okay. But the problem is over 90% of annuities aren't turned into a pension. That term is called annuitized. When you take an annuity and you annuitize it, that's when they say, ooh, based on your life expectancy, we're going to take your $100,000 and we're going to give you $6,000 a year for the rest of your life, even if you live to 200. Okay? They do their calculations, they make their money. Okay? If you live a year, they make out well. If you live 100 years, like Methuselah, well then you make out. 90% annuities aren't annuitized. They want to make a change. They don't need to turn it into a pension. So then this bucket is irrelevant. They come back to this bucket and suddenly they realize that, whoa, 4% a year in fees, that's eating into my investment return. My $100,000 10 years later is like $110,000. That's pretty stinky. That's what matters. And here's the kicker. Annuities have ridiculous commissions. You sell a and I have access to these. I've probably utilized maybe a half a dozen annuities in 12, 13 years. $100,000 annuity could pay anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 in a commission to the broker. I got a real problem with that. Okay? I got a real problem. It's like insurance. There's really cheap, inexpensive ways to do it. There's some really expensive ways to do it. And when someone's selling you the really expensive ways, it's because that's how they're trying to put me, make ends meet or whatnot. I use term insurance. It's cheap. There's different strokes for different folks. But annuities, any type of product that is going to pay someone 5, 7, 12% in a commission, that's, don't get me wrong, it's great. But there's not a need for it. So you put $100,000 in this product, it's gonna pay a broker $7,000. It's gonna force you to keep your money there for 7 years. It's called a surrender period. They all have them. I got client now. Ameriprise, like most big firms, they restrict how long some of these annuities are. I've seen annuity surrender periods as long as 18 years. I don't know if you guys have this thing called.
What's the other called? What's the other one's called?
Oh, it's on the radio.
Money
Stock
market
market.
or
You hear all these financial ads on the radio?
Bonds or
You know, a
stocks.
crash-proof retirement.
It starts
That
with an
term
A
not out
also.
here?
What's the other
Good
one
for you.
called?
They are selling annuities. Okay. If you
Multiple.
Okay,
Oh, yeah,
so if you ever talk with somebody about an annuity,
Can't think.
make sure that they email you the proposal or the prospectus. Make sure everything that they give you is not in person, because there needs to be a record of it. And suddenly that 4-page proposal that you get in person, that's all roses and sunshine. Suddenly it's a 28-page proposal that they email you. Well, why is that? Because there's like 12 pages of disclaimers that have to tell you that, you're probably gonna lose money.
It becomes a
So,
contract.
it is, it's a contract.
When you sign up
You
for
wanna pull your money out, that surrender period, if you're year 1 into year 7, it's like a 10% loss right off the top if you wanna pull your money out early. Because they gotta pay that big old commission. So, sorry, I rabbit trailed. I'll take one more and then we'll eat free food.
You can get more into detail. Tax-free
Yep,
or taxable 401k versus Roth.
401k
Or
versus
both.
Roth 401k.
We'll
Lost
get
Jordan.
into it with,
So depend, and he was one asking it too. So if it's okay, I'm gonna just pause
just
there.
broad it.
Just broad.
I'm here.
Oh, you're here. This food is.
Well, I think what would be wise,
Yep.
why don't we break for food? Everyone hungry?
Yes.
Most,
I was like, answer the question.
break for
Lee."
food, we'll take 10 minutes to kind of eat and then at least give Lee an opportunity to have some food.
Yeah.
And then we can ask those questions, because we have about 45 minutes until the next session. So we have
Nice.
45 minutes to eat lunch and
I'll
ask
give you,
more
I'll give you,
questions.
I'll give you half now and half after.
Well, I was just asking for the broad term, you can give more
To be
specific.
The broad term is, I love tax-free. Roth IRAs, Roth 401ks. But the real question is tax rates higher now, or are they gonna be higher in the future? So if you're gonna, if you're early on and you're saving money, if we assume tax rates are gonna be up, either because we're making more, or the government's gonna have higher tax rates, which I would say is probably likely, well,
No.
yes. Are they doing a good job of spending their money? No. Okay? It really is, yes, I know, right? Again, not getting into politics. President Trump is not a fiscal Republican. He's not a traditional fiscal Republican. As much as he is a very strong advocate he's the most pro-life president in history, he is not a Tea Party conservative when it comes to spending. He's, and again, I'm not getting into, we shouldn't spend this money. I'm not saying certain, but the debt is going up. This is going to become Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare. These are all problems that are going to have to be dealt with. That being said, I believe taxes are going up. We save our money into Roth IRAs. I would be doing that now. I would be doing that in 20, 30 years. Solely. Now, there's 3 options. There's tax-free, there's tax-deferred, like normal IRAs and and then there is just non-retirement accounts. Non-retirement accounts are just you having a joint account with your wife, or just an account in your name. And investments go in there, and they don't have to be staying there until age 59 and a half.
Mutual fund.
And you pay a
Yeah,
different
mutual
sort of
funds,
taxes.
what you're thinking.
You put $1,000 in there, it grows to $1,100, and you sell it, you pay capital gains tax on the 100, the gain. It's not like a retirement account like a 401k where I put $1,000 in, I then take $1,000 out or more down the future, I pay income tax on that $1,000. So there's 3 buckets that are really important. Retirement accounts like traditional IRAs, traditional 401ks, there's tax-free, yeah. Roth IRAs, Roth 401ks, that's where you're taking your money and paying the tax first in your paycheck, and then your money hits your bank, and then you put it into that account, it grows tax-free. And then there's non-retirement accounts. So I like to have diversity in them, having extremes in any one, but it really depends on what your personal situation is, and that's just not a cop-out so that I can get pizza, or whatever else. Yeah,
Just to make people aware.
or sandwiches, or whatever, yeah.
There are three options, but I've heard,
Yep.
balance out between the two.
Correct.
Between a 401K and a
Correct.
Roth, kind of
As
be
long as you have the
splitting that
emergency
up.
fund, I
Diversify.
believe tax rates are going up. I mean, in theory, if we're saving money, not only are we gonna be in a higher tax bracket because we've saved and are earning more in future years, the tax rates are at an all-time low historically, state and federal. I mean, we see what's happening to the states. I don't know what Ohio's like, but Jersey's right behind Illinois. Illinois is trying to decide which pensions to cut. Do we cut the firefighters' pension or we cut the teachers' pension? They just decided to cut the teachers' pension because the firefighters, they actively are doing stuff that is gonna cause havoc if they aren't getting their pension. States can't go bankrupt. We got a big problem on our hands. It'd be very good if we have our own financial ships in order, you know, because the government surely doesn't, state or federal. So, yeah, we'll grab some food. I'm happy to answer some questions. I appreciate you guys